and welcome to episode 2 of Payton's Playbook. On today's episode, we're doing week 1 college football recaps. There was lots of action, some upsets, some major blowouts, but overall, I'm excited that college football is back. So on today's episode, be sure you stay tuned for recapping a lot of the games that went down as we head into week 2. All right, so like I said, in today's episode, we are highlighting the week 1 for college football. But every Wednesday before I highlight what happened throughout the weekend, I'm going to be highlighting one key player. It can be offense, it can be defense, from any team that I feel like stood out in that week. There's lots of players that stood out to me this week, but the one I want to highlight is from Tennessee, the Tennessee Bulls freshman starting quarterback. He had an amazing start to the season, and I thought, let's highlight him and show off the brand new Bulls hat I just got from No Rivals. If you want some college football game day gear, be sure you go check them out, No Rivals. So let's get into it. Nico Iamaleava, he is the SEC co-freshman of the week for football. He had a great start to the season. Again, he's a freshman, so he threw for 3 touchdowns, 314 yards, and I feel like this is the start of a Tennessee run to the college football playoffs, especially with it being a 12-team playoff this season. So I think he definitely proved that he is ready for the big time in college football, and I think this is going to be a great run and a great start for Tennessee on the offensive side. So don't forget the name. He's the freshman quarterback, Nico Iamaleava, SEC co-freshman of the week. And then when you talk about Tennessee, it's not just the quarterback. Tennessee had a great game in general. They won 69-3 over Chattanooga, 717 yards on offense. So I thought it was a great week. I wanted to highlight that one key player. I know there's a lot more players, even Travis Hunter, that I could have highlighted, but I thought we're going to highlight them today, and we'll see who we highlight next week. So without further ado, let's get into week 1 recaps. All right, well, college football is back. So we're going to get into recapping all that happened this week. It's exciting. There was lots of action, upsets, some huge blowouts. But overall, fans are excited. I'm excited because college football is here and there's only more to come. It's only week 1. So a lot of this stuff, rankings changed, but it's still week 1. You have to watch at least through week 3, week 4 to kind of see how every team's going to improve for week 1. They're kind of just getting all the games under their belt, especially a lot of these transfer students who have never played for that team. And then just in general, game is now on film, so coaches can watch that. There's a lot more to come, but we're going to recap week 1 because why not? And there was a lot of things that are exciting that happened in week 1. So we're going to start off with the CSU-Texas game. And the reason we're starting off with this game is because Texas is playing Michigan this week in Michigan, and surprisingly, Texas is favored to win in Michigan Stadium. So that's a big thing. Michigan hasn't been the underdog at their own stadium in 7 years. So that's saying something. And obviously, if you watch the CSU-Texas game, it was great for Texas. They won 52-0 against Colorado State. If you looked at my prediction, I did have CSU scoring couple points, a field goal, a touchdown later in that fourth quarter, especially because I knew Texas was going to pull. If they got ahead, they were going to pull their key players because they knew they had Michigan this week. Fortunately, that did not happen. CSU never saw the end of the end zone. So Texas had a great win. They showed they were great offensively, great defensively. At first quarter, CSU was only down by 7. It was 0-7 at the end of the first quarter. I posted that. That shocked me a little bit, but it just took a couple more snaps for Texas to find their feet. And boy, did they, 52-0 in Texas. And then, of course, you have Arch Manning throwing his first collegiate touchdown of the season, which I'm sure we will see him more as the season goes on, especially in these earlier games. However, there's a big game this week, and I know it's going to be one of the most talked about games. That's Michigan, Texas. Be sure you're watching that because that is going to be a major game of the week. So without further ado, I have Texas winning that game. Only by 7, though. I have the final score of that game being 28-21. Texas winning. I think it's going to be a close game up until that fourth quarter, but I guess we're just going to have to see. So that's the first game that happened this week. Now we're going to go into, of course, I have to talk about CU, North Dakota State. That game was a little too close for my liking, especially being a CU Buffs fan. 31-26, CU ended up pulling out that win. But they almost did it within the last 30 seconds of the game. NDSU threw a Hail Mary pass and was just about 4 yards short of defeating CU Buffs. It was the Buffs versus the Bison, a game everyone is watching. In fact, it was the most watched game in 7 years for a Thursday opener, ranking in at top peak views of 5.6 million viewers on ESPN. So even if you're not a Buffs fan, even if you say you're not a Buffs fan and you didn't watch it, clearly 5.6 million people were watching it at some point. So I think CU is going to be something that we're just going to have to see. They have a big game this week against Nebraska in Lincoln. I think that's going to be a true testament of what we're going to see. Defense didn't impress me so much. Offensive line was a little better. They still put a lot of pressure on Shedeur Sanders, where he's having to make these kind of short, quick passes, run outside of the pocket. He was under pressure a lot, but it looked considerably better than last season. But like I said, defense just wasn't there for me. Again, a lot of these players, their transfers, haven't played with this team. So it's the first game of the week. They got that first game under their belt, but I'm expecting them to need to step up a lot more on defense and a little more on offense to beat Nebraska this week. And then, of course, you can't talk CU without talking Travis Hunter. And boy, he is an incredible player. He is, I think, top running right now for the Heisman Trophy. There's a couple other people, but watching that game, he played, 55 snaps on offense. And this is where I think he stands out right now for that Heisman candidate. 64 snaps on defense. He played both sides of the ball and had highlight-worthy catches also within the game while playing both sides of the ball. The catch over the helmet of the defensive player, that was amazing to score that touchdown. He had 3 touchdowns, and I just think that CU can be this amazing team, especially with Shedeur and Travis as that duo. But we're going to have to see what really happens this week. I do have them winning to Nebraska this week. However, it's going to be a close game. And if they win, I think it's going to be 21-24. It's going to be a close game. But nothing can tell me that Travis Hunter isn't one of the best players in college football right now. Last year, his season got cut short a little bit. He got hurt against that CSU rival game at Folsom Field on the 3rd game. So he did get cut short a little bit. And of course, then CU didn't have the ending of the season they were hoping for. But I think if CU can pull off this win against Nebraska, and then they come to Fort Collins to play CSU, which we saw CSU lost 52-0 to Texas, I think it's going to be a great season for them. Again, they still have a lot to prove, but Shedeur and Travis Hunter, that's a duo that you cannot miss and you need to be watching. All right, so we talked about CU, we talked about CSU, we got the Colorado schools out of the way. So now let's talk about the big game of the week, Georgia versus Clemson. Lots of people had this game being closer. A lot of people had Georgia winning, and Georgia did win, but probably not by what you thought. They won 34-3. Clemson never got a touchdown in that game, and people were expecting Clemson to kind of come out here and prove something. They just needed to prove offensively that they could run the ball, and they didn't run the ball at all. They only got 188 yards total offense, no running. They were forced to throw, and that's what Georgia wanted them to do. That's how Georgia won that game, 34-3. Obviously, you had that player suspended from Georgia, so he should be back this coming week, but 13 first downs total for Clemson. That's not going to win you a game for sure. Clemson has a lot to prove right now. I want to know, I know how I feel, but how does the Clemson fan base feel? Because, you go into that game, obviously it's Georgia. It's going to be a tough game, but you're hoping to put some points on the board. You're hoping to score at least a touchdown, right? A touchdown, a couple touchdowns. You may not be expecting to win that game, but you're expecting to put some points on that board, especially being a major powerhouse football team. So I just want to know kind of how you guys feel. How does that Clemson fan base feel? Are you still hopeful for this season? Was that kind of like a, man, we have a lot of work to do. Like, what should we do coming up? So I just want to know what you guys feel. I think that Clemson still has a lot to prove. We'll see in week 2 what they can do. Again, the nice thing is you never have to play Georgia right now. So you kind of got that game out of the way, which is nice. Obviously Georgia was dominant. We knew they were going to be a little dominant, but just let me know how you guys feel. So on the way up though, we had Miami, and that was a fun game to watch. Miami, Florida. Miami on the road. They were in the swamp and they won 41-17. Oh my goodness. On the road too. That was a fun game. Miami, I have a feeling, could win the ACC, especially if you just watch the FSU game. Right now, I feel like the ACC is kind of out of whack a little bit. We got to pull them in. But I feel like Miami, definitely after that showing, again, it's the first week, has a chance to win the ACC. Let me know what you guys think. If you think I'm kind of jumping to conclusions, again, it's week 1, lots more football to play, but Miami definitely showed up on the road in the swamp at Florida, won that game. It was the most points ever allowed by Florida in a home opener. So that's a huge thing. There was 385 yards, passed, 3 touchdowns by the quarterback for Miami. I just think this offensive was rolling, and I think that we are in for a great season by Miami. So next game we're kind of going to talk about is the Notre Dame Texas A&M game, 23-13 on the road. Notre Dame pulled that one off. That was a great game. There was lots of fun games to watch this week. Again, week 1, kind of new players getting that first game, that feeling under their belt, but Notre Dame definitely pulled off the upset there. The O-line kind of had to grow into the game, though. It started off kind of slow against a great Texas defensive line, too. So I think throughout the game, we saw that offensive line grow into the game. And then now Notre Dame is favored in most of their upcoming games. So I think Notre Dame has a really good shot at kind of getting ahead in this kind of top 25 AP rankings because they are favored. Again, you could have this upset, but this was a tough first game for Notre Dame, and they definitely proved something that they were able to show up, able to work offensively. And I think it's going to be a great season for them. So we'll just have to see. Michigan versus Fresno, we'll kind of just roll through some of the games. They won 30-10. And then, of course, we have to talk about FSU. And wow, they were ranked 10 start the season. Woo! FSU ranked 10. They didn't make the college football playoffs last year, but there were some high expectations because of how good they were last year, right? All right, so everyone's hopeful. Everyone's excited. Then they lose their first game against they lost against Georgia Tech. That game was in Ireland. They lost that game 24-21. Okay, they're supposed to win that game 24-21. That's okay, right? We're going to go into week 1. FSU is still confident, right? Nope. Everyone thought that FSU would win. 84% of bets for money line was for Florida State beating Boston College, and that didn't happen. 28-13. Again, put 1 touchdown on the board. That's not going to win you a game, but it's especially not going to win you a game against Boston College. Boston College kind of went off. Again, they knew they were kind of underdogs going into this game. And, well, 84% of people who took that bet lost. And if you were the if you were the other percent of people that took Boston College, I don't know if you knew anything, if you were just doing it for the fun of it, but congrats. Yeah, FSU now is fallen out of the AP ranking top 25. Again, they started as number 10, no longer in the top 25, and I'm kind of nervous to see what's going to happen throughout the season. But right now they're 0-2 to start the season, and obviously we all know last year they were undefeated, missed that college football playoffs, but starting 0-2 is definitely going to take you out of that pretty quickly. So we're going to have to see what happens with Florida State. You had Utah versus Southern Utah, 49-0. Auburn versus Alabama A&M, 73-3. Again, these are teams that you knew they were favored to win this game by a lot. So I'm just kind of rolling through them, letting you guys know what the scores are, kind of where people stand. You have Oregon versus Idaho. That was kind of I don't want to say a boring game. It was just uninspiring. Oregon did end up winning that game 24-14 over an FCS opponent. But just people weren't like, Oregon was supposed to be really good, right? They fell 4 spots down, so they're now ranked to number 7 with that uninspiring win. We'll just have to see. It wasn't a bad game. Oregon still won the game, just wasn't inspiring. Kind of, it didn't really catch anyone's eye. No one was really like, wow, did you see that play? So we're gonna have to see how Oregon does. They're playing Boise State. I do think they're gonna come out with a big win against Boise State. I have that game doing 42-24. So we should see some more highlight-worthy catches from plays in that game, but we'll have to see. I do have them winning, but we're just gonna have to see, since that first game just didn't put like that dot into what they want to do for this coming season. Then you have USC versus LSU. I know lots of people were happy about this upset. USC was ranked 23rd. They now moved to 13. They beat LSU, who was ranked 12th, 27-20. They limited LSU to 117 yards on offense on the ground. So I think it was an upset. That's what I'm going to go. It was an upset. I was excited to see that USC beat LSU in this game. We're going to have to see how that kind of plays out. Again, they're in a new conference, so that's also another thing. But I was excited about that win. There's still a lot more you have to see from them in terms of on the defensive side of things. But it was a great first game for them, great first week, and we'll see what happens this week. And then last but not least, we have to talk about, of course, the upcoming game this week. We have Michigan versus Texas. Like I said, that is the game of the week right now. Michigan is underdogs. Texas is favored by 7.5 points. Said Texas 27-21 is going to pull off that upset. This week we have Tennessee versus NC State. You have a Heisman hopeful there with the Tennessee Vols quarterback, I believe. And then you have Oregon, Boise State, CU Nebraska. Penn State versus Bowling Green. I have that game being a major blowout. Penn State taking that, especially in the way they showed up this week. I have that game being 41-7. Then you have Notre Dame versus Northern Illinois. Again, Notre Dame beat Texas A&M this week. I have that game being an upset. Not an upset, but like a major just blowout for Notre Dame. Another kind of way for them to prove that they belong in that top 25. I have that game going 42-10. And then you have Alabama versus South Florida, 49-13. That's what I got. So that's kind of was week 1. Lots of upsets, lots of teams you knew would win that did. You have Alabama winning. You had Texas winning. But then there were some kind of crazy things that got thrown in. You had USC beating LSU. You had Notre Dame beating Texas A&M, Miami beating Florida. And that's the one team I'm going to keep my eyes on. I think they are on the way up. So it's going to be a great week 2 for college football. Lots of big games, lots of games that are kind of going to be that, I'd say, the early on defining moment, especially for the CU Buffs versus Nebraska. I think CU needs to win that game, especially they're on the road again next week against the CSU Rams. So that's a game I'm going to watch. Of course, you're going to watch Texas and Michigan, Notre Dame. Lots of big games in week 2. So be sure to put in the comments what you guys think are some of your predictions for this upcoming week of college football, what teams you feel like are on the way up or on the way down, and let me know your thoughts. As always, thank you for joining me for the second episode of Payton's Playbook.